Just a reminder to vote in this week's Locals poll, where you decide what deck I take to Locals every single week. Without any further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video. What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and for today we have another deck profile. This time, this is the deck we took to Locals this past week, being Predaplant. So here is a cut to what the deck looks like on paper, then we'll get to the card by card. Alright, so starting with our high-level monsters, we've got 1 Helianthrophorinchus, 2 Banksy Ogre, and 1 Drosophilum Hydra. So basically all 3 of these have direct interactions with predator counters. This one special summons itself out for free if you have a counter on the field. And then these 2 can actually tribute opponent's monsters while they have a predator counter to special summon. Then when this one gets destroyed, or rather sent from the field to the graveyard, you get to put a counter on every monster your opponent controls. And we're running 1 of this one because this one can summon itself from the hand or grave. So there's really no sense in running more than 1 since we can recycle it. Next, we're running 3 Spinodionea. So when summoned, it will put a counter on an opponent's monster, and predator counters, if you don't know, makes the opponent's monsters level 1. So that can really disrupt things like Synchro and Xyz plays. So this is definitely one you want to summon out a lot. Next is 3 Orphoscorpio. So this is pretty much the main starter. So just on summon, you can send a monster from hand to grave to special summon a Predaplant from your deck. So this is definitely one you want to see in your starting hand, or at least have a way to search it at all times. Next, I'm running 2 Darlingtonia Cobra. Some people will opt to only play 1, but I'm running 2 just because of the fact that if it's in your starting hand, it's pretty much useless because its effect is only once per duel. So basically what I do is I run 2, so that way even if I start with 1 in my hand, I have another one in the deck I can summon off of Scorpio. So that way I can have that effect online. Next is 3 Chlamydos Sundew. This one is actually very important to the deck also. It allows you to fusion summon using your opponent's monsters if they have predator counters. So this is one that you can also special summon off of Scorpio's effect. It's really, really good. This is another one that is always a welcome sight in your hand. Next, we're running 2 Biblisp. So when it's sent to the grave, we get a search, and then it can revive itself if there's a predator counter on the field. But if it revives itself with its own effect, it is banished. But playing this for the search effect, that way we can search for things like Scorpio or one of our high-level ones that we mentioned earlier. Running 2 Saraceniant. So basically, this is it's kind of like a Battle Fader. But basically, if our opponent declares a direct attack, we can special summon it from our hand. And then during damage calc, we can blow both this monster up and the opponent's monster. And when it's sent to the grave, we get a search. So, nice way to stop from direct attacks there. And for the final monster, we are running 1 Cordyceps. So we basically want to kind of foolish burial this because we can banish it from the grave during our standby phase to revive 2 Predaplants from the grave. And that can trigger Cobra's effect, so keep that in mind. So we didn't use that one at Locals, but I've used it quite often. I could have, but I decided not to. But we'll get into the reason why I didn't use it later. Summon limit. Anyway, next moving on to the spells, we're running 3 Predapractice. Alright, so this is one of the best cards in the deck. So it allows us to special summon a Predaplant from our hand, and then we can add a Predap card from our deck to our hand. I mean, it locks us into Predaplants, but this is a 100% pure Predaplant build, so that doesn't inhibit us in any way. So yeah, this is definitely a card you want to see in your opening hand or search for as soon as possible. Along with Scorpio, or even one like Spinodionea, it can really get your plays going. Other Predap spells are running. I'm running 1 Predaplast and 2 Predapruning. Predapruning is basically a monster reborn in equipped spell form, and Predaplast allows us to reveal Predap cards in our hand, target that same number of monsters, and then put predator counters on them. So we actually used this in, I believe it was game 1 against the Dinomorphia Punk player in order to pump up our Triphioverutum enough to beat over one of his other monsters to win the game. So those are really nice there. Next, going into the fusion spells now. So I'm running 2 polymerization, 1 instant fusion because it's limited, and 2 super poly. So I'm running 2 of each because I don't want to just have my hand clogged with nothing but fusion spells. And with polymerization, this can also be recovered with another card that we're going to get to later. Instant Fusion's really good for getting out Ambulomalites, so that's really nice there, and it's searchable. Super Poly, I'm running 2 because it is searchable, and like I said, I don't want to have my hand filled with nothing but fusion spells, and I don't want to have to discard Super Poly for Super Poly, so running 2 is just a way to kind of prevent that from happening, and also usually I don't need 3 since it is searchable. But speaking of 3 Allure of Darkness because every monster in the deck is Dark Attribute. So this is just a way to draw cards. You know, I feel like that's pretty standard. Next, for more fusion support, we're running 2 Fusion Recycling Plant. So this is the card I mentioned earlier. So by discarding a card, we can add a polymerization from our deck or graveyard to our hand so we can get our regular polymerization back. We can also use that to set up our graveyard with things like Biblisp to get other effects, or we can also use things like Drosophilum Hydra, get it from our hand to the grave, search poly, then tribute an opponent's monster to summon it from the grave. So just a nice setup card there, and a good way to get consistency. It also adds things back to your hand during the end phase that are used as fusion material, so we can still have discard fodder for Super Poly. Next, I'm also running 1 Foolish Burial Goods. This is so we can dump a spell or trap. We're usually going to be dumping one of the trap cards that we'll mention here in a minute, although you can dump Predaplant because you can banish it to prevent a Predaplant from being destroyed by battle. And now moving into the traps. For the main 2 that we want to dump off the Foolish Burial Goods, we have Predaplant and Predaplanting. So Predaplant, while on the field, it gets us a search when a monster with a Predator counter leaves the field. And then when we activate this, we send a Predaplant from our deck to the grave. It'll usually be either Biblisp or Cordyceps to put a counter on everything on the field. And then while it's in the grave, we can banish this to perform a fusion summon. And when we fusion summon, we can banish this from the grave to destroy something on the field. And for the final trap card, we're running 1 Necro Fusion. So this is just a last-ditch way to fusion summon during the battle phase if we're in dire straits. And yeah, so that's going to be it for the main deck. Now we're going to go to the extra deck. So starting off, we're running 3 Ambulomalites. So this on Fusion Summon gets us a search of any Predap card. So yeah, that's really good consistency booster. And it's also really good to use as material for Dragostopalia. And then we can tribute either an opponent's monster with a Predator counter or a Predaplant we control to special summon any Predaplant we want from the deck, whether that's Spinodionea or Scorpio. So yeah, really nice starter right there. Next, we are going to be running 3 Chimeraphlasia. So like I said, this is 100% pure Predaplant, just like from Yuri's deck in the anime. So this is a really good one when you have Predator counters on the field, because since the counters make your opponent's monsters level 1, Chimeraphlasia can, once per turn, banish an opponent's monster that has an equal or lower level. So since an opponent's monster with a Predator counter is level 1, we can target and banish it. And then during the battle phase, when it's being attacked or when it's attacking, you can make that opponent's monster lose 1,000 attack, and then it gains 1,000 attack, bringing it up to 3,500. And then, during the next standby, after it's been destroyed, you get to search for any fusion or polymerization spell. So again, using this, we can search Super Poly, or Instant Fusion, or Fusion Recycling Plant. Literally whatever we want. Next, running one Starving Venomy Dragon. So this is one used by Yuri in the manga. I specifically run this just for Pendulum matchups. There was a time where I could have summoned this, because one of the guys uses Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser to go into a rank 4. And I debated using this when I super polyed it, but I went for one of my other monsters instead. I think I went for Triffy instead. But with this, we can negate effects, debuff by 500, and do 500 burn once per turn. So it's not bad, but definitely could also be better. But I do wonder how the game could have gone if I summoned this because of the burn damage, because that game was the one we lost due to time. And I was only about 500 life points off. So this could have actually decided the game in our favor. But that's neither here nor there. Next, we're running 2 Dragostapelia. So with this, you have to have a fusion and a dark. And once per turn, as a quick effect, you can put a counter on an opponent's monster. And it also negates the activated effects of all monsters your opponent controls that has a predator counter. So this one's really good. I'm running it at 2 because, one, you have to invest another fusion into it already, but also, since it is a Predaplant by name, we can reborn it with Predapruning. So I feel like running 3 is kind of overkill. Next, for one of the main Super Poly targets is Starving Venom Fusion Dragon at 3. So, because again, this is Yuri's deck from the anime, Starving Venom just kind of makes sense. Really good there. I don't think Starving Venom needs any more explanation than that. Next, running 1 Triffy Overrootum. So this one it can be a little bit tricky if you're new to Predaplants, because this one requires 3 dark monsters on the field. So the best way to do this one is either using Super Poly with your opponent's monsters, or using Chlamydo Sundew with your opponent's monsters. But it can, once per turn, negate an extra deck summon and destroy it, and then if there's a predator counter on the field, it can revive itself in defense. And with 3,000 defense, it's pretty good, and it also gains the attack of all monsters on the field with a predator counter, so it's really good with cards like Predaplast and Predaplanning. And I used this against Dinomorphia Punk. I normal summoned a Predaplant and then super polyed away his Kentragina, Rexsturm, and my one Predaplant monster, I don't even remember what it was, in order to make this, and then put a counter on whatever other monster he had to buff this up to 6,000, and then I just hit with that for game. So I literally OTK'd him because he paid so much life points. He only had like 1,400 left, which paired with the Rexsturm was pretty scary, but I was able to find the out there. Next is 1 Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon. This one actually came up really good in the last round. Unfortunately, we did lose in time, but we used this to out his Utopia the Lightning, because it was able to permanently negate its effects and drop it down to 0. Or rather, well, it didn't do it permanently, but we did it twice in a row. But he was able to negate our attacks and so forth. But this was a nice out to that. And then finally, we're running Predapower. Alright, so we're running one of this. This is a once per turn tribute a monster with a predator counter on either side of the field to negate an activated effect. So it's good, but you have to invest a Dark Fusion and a Fusion. So, and again, I could have gone for this against the Dinomorphia Punk player, but given the counters that were on the field, I decided to go for Triffy instead, just to one-punch him. But yeah, so that's going to be it for the deck profile. We'll shuffle up, and then we'll get to some test hands. Alright, let's see what we get. So starting, we have a Biblisp, Sundew, Scorpio, nice. Predaplanting, that's nice. And Recycling Plant. Okay, so... And with this deck, one reason why I was very confident in doing well with this deck at locals is because with this deck, we can go first or second. The only thing that really changes is what we search off of some of our cards like Ambulomalites or Predapractus. It just, the searches vary depending on whether we're going first or second. But I guess we'll do going first with this, and then we'll do going second later. So what we're going to do is first we're going to go ahead and activate Fusion Recycling Plant. All right. Then we're going to activate Fusion Recycling Plant, sending Biblisp from our hand to the grave. Now, assuming there's no ash there, we're going to be able to add a Polymerization from our deck to our hand. So we're going to be getting the OG Poly. Now, in a new chain, Biblisp will trigger, since it was sent to the grave, to search a Predaplant monster. So we're going to get... We're going to go ahead and search a Hydra. And I'll show you why. So what we're going to do is then we're going to go ahead and normal summon Scorpio. We're going to use Scorpio's effect, discarding Hydra, to summon a Predaplant monster from our deck. Alright, so we're going to get Cobra from our deck in defense position. Now, since Cobra was special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, we get to search a fusion or polymerization spell card from our deck to our hand. But I will say this is once per duel. Okay, that's once per duel. So we're going to get us a Super Poly off of the Scorpio. Or not the Scorpio, the Cobra. Alright, so now we've got us a Super Poly. Alright, so now what we're going to do, given our current hand, is we're going to go and activate Polymerization. Alright, we're going to go and fuse these two on the field together. And we're going to go ahead and get Ambulomalites, since we're going first. Alright, so upon being fusion summoned, Ambulomalites will trigger. We can search a Predap card from our deck to our hand. So what we're going to do is, since we're going first, we're gonna search for Predaplant. If we were going second, we would go for Predaplast. But since we're going first, we're going to try to go ahead and get this out the deck with this. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to set 1, 2, 3. And then we'll move towards end phase. And then Fusion Recycling Plant will get us a Fusion Material Monster back to our hand during the end phase. We'll just go ahead and get Scorpio back, because Scorpio's awesome. Now, what we would do is once our opponent summons a couple monsters, if it's clear he's going to go for a Synchro or an XZ summon, is we would go ahead and flip up Predaplanting. Because then we can actually dump our second copy of Biblisp to get a search during our opponent's turn and put predator counters on all of their monsters. Alright, so we would... Okay, where is it? Alright, so we're going to dump the Biblisp, put counters on everything our opponent controls. Alright, and then we'll get a search off of Biblisp effect. We'll go ahead and add Saracenia just in case. Alright, this goes to grave. So now we've interrupted their plays. And if we know they're running links or anything, we can get a search off of Predaplant, and if there's any darks, we can Super Poly. Alright, so there's that. We'll do a going second hand right quick, and then that'll be it for the video. Alright, going second hand, here we go. Nice. Super Poly. Banksy Ogre. Okay. Sundew's really nice. Ooh, Predapractice. Okay. Alright, so this is what we would start out with. Not bad. Drawing the Cobra is not very good, but again, that's why I run 2, because then we still have one in the deck to use for this. Alright, now, since this is a going second hand, we're going to go ahead and draw our 6th card. Nice, we got Allure. Okay, so right off the bat, we're going to just fire off the Allure. Bait any ashes or anything like that. So we're going to draw 2 and banish a dark. Draw 1, 2. We'll banish this Cobra since its effect can't be used. Since we drew another Allure, we'll go ahead and fire that off too. Draw 2. And we'll banish this Saracenia since we already have one in our hand. Okay, so this is actually looking really, really good right now. So what we can do is we're going to go ahead and fire off Predapractice. This allows us to special summon a Predaplant monster from our hand, and then we can search a Predap card. So what we're going to do is we're going to summon Spinodionea and search for Scorpio, because, you know, he's the main boy. Scorpio, where are you? There you are. Okay. Now, in a new chain, Spinodionea would trigger, which would put a predator counter on an opponent's monster, which we could then tribute that opponent's monster for Banksy Ogre. Boom. 2 monsters, and we haven't even normal summoned yet. Alright, now, from what we could do for here just depends on what's on the opponent's field, depending on like how many monsters they have. Because we could normal summon Scorpio, pitch 1, special Cobra from deck, add a polymerization or fusion spell, maybe something like instant fusion. Or we could just go straight into Super Poly. So, I mean, it's not really an in-depth combo because this deck is designed to be somewhat flexible because we can put counters on things for Sundew. We can tribute our opponent's monster to a Banksy Ogre. We can Super Poly their stuff away. So we have a bunch of different Predaplant options. But yeah, it just kind of, what we would do from here just kind of depends on what our opponent has. So that's basically it for the deck profile. I do wish we had done better, but when you get paired up against 2 stun decks in a row and lose the die roll both times, what can you do? So, so yeah, hopefully we do better next week, but go ahead and be sure to vote in the locals poll. The last time I looked, Phantom Knights and Raid Raptors were tied, so that's kind of interesting, especially since they're from the same show. But yeah, so make sure you guys vote in the locals poll. Really appreciate all the people that do that. Because it saves me from having to make a tough decision every week. But yeah, that'll be it for the video, and I'll see you next time.